My name is Jana, and I am one of the infant and early childhood mental health consultants for Reach Dane, as well as some other programs in the community. So I'm excited to be here with you to talk a little bit more about should we tell children to apologize? Um, and we know that this happens a lot throughout the day in your work, right? Where a child does something that impacts another person in a negative way, and we want them to apologize. So let's take a look closer at this together. And again, as Grace said, feel free to put your questions in chat. I have support to help me monitor that and your comments and your ideas. So I really want to start with what are we hoping for? I want to hear from you in chat. When we as adults are asking children to apologize, what is it that we are hoping that will happen in that apology? What are we hoping for children? They won't do it again. Yes. Anyone else? The definition of apologize is to express regret for something we've done wrong. So we know it comes from these good intentions, right? Yes, we want them to learn empathy, forgiveness, and that they impacted someone else. Mhm. That they show remorse and are willing to learn from it. Yes, and learning how other people feel, empathy. Yes, you got it. So these are good things, right? We want this for children. So we're gonna talk more about that. Let's see if I can get my buttons to work. Here we go. So we're hoping that they'll take accountability for their actions, as you said, and ownership over their mistakes, right? And that they can start to begin to understand that their actions affect other people, right? And feel remorse for that. Um, and then learning to be respectful of other people's feelings and other people's needs, right? And other people's rights is a really important thing that we're wanting from these apologies. And then I've often heard too, we want them to repair the relationship with the other person and show that they care about that relationship. But what we know is that when we force an apology, it's generally ineffective at these goals that we're asking for. When we force young children to say sorry before they understand it, it actually makes it harder for them to learn to say sorry in a true way. So, what actually happens when we force children to say sorry? What happens is it teaches kids to be insincere if they're not actually yet sorry. I've seen kids punch another kid at the exact same time that they're saying sorry, and then move on and punch another kid. They start to learn that this is a magic word, and the other person feels that insincerity, right? And so it's generally ineffective at repairing harm to the relationships. And most of you have probably had the experience of someone asking you to say sorry when you were not yet feeling sorry, when you're still mad, right? And this is because after we've done something, we're not feeling sorry yet. We need that time to kind of calm down and reflect on our actions and our feelings and how it might have affected someone else. And if it happens too soon, if we force that apology, children don't have time to feel that regret and to pay attention to the consequences of their actions. And they need time to feel that remorse, right? And we rob them of that reflection time when we force an apology instead of allowing them to come naturally to it. Sorry, I have to move your faces again. Uh, And then we're also teaching them that words are enough to make it better. And it may not be enough, right? It can often be about action. And I think some of you said this in the chat to repair it, or to change the behavior in the future. And our job as teachers, as early childhood caregivers, is to teach them these skills that they might need. We're also teaching them, when we force an apology, to ignore their own feelings, and instead focus on the other person. And when we do this, we're actually teaching people pleasing and reinforcing lack of your boundaries and getting your own need met. And we're teaching them to mistrust their own feelings, right? We want to slow down and really understand everyone's feelings in the story. Because if we don't do that, it can create resentment and anger and shame and shut down the conversation. And so they don't have an opportunity to learn from it, right? So we're going to empathize with the anger or the frustration or the desire that brought them to that point of hurting someone else, right? Not with the behavior, but with the feeling behind it, if that makes sense. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So first I want to just show you a video of Super Nanny. This is a really old show. I hope it's not still running. And just pay attention to what you're noticing in this video based on what we just talked about. Give me just a second to switch my screen over.
Concerned that Darren and Trisha aren't using the naughty bench correctly, Super Nanny wants to refine their technique.
Jana, be part of the captions.
And it's not long before she gets the chance.
Down. This is your
sorry.
I want you to come to the table and sit down with everybody else and eat the cake. I'll read you. Now you're going on the bench.
Once on the bench, Matthew's protest takes the now familiar form.
Every time he throws something, then he doesn't understand what it's like to then be clearing up the mess afterwards. Yeah. Throw the shoes, you have to spend time picking them up. Yeah. You wreck your room, you're going to have to spend time cleaning that up.
But addressing the mess must wait until Matthew's first apologised.
I want you to apologise.
Properly.
Let's go. Let's go. What's that? Say to him, you do not say you're sorry like that. You do not say you're sorry in an angry tone. Say it nicely. Well, we'll come back in a minute and you say nicely.
For Matthew, sorry seems to be the hardest word.
Say you're sorry to me. Then you will stay on this bench until you can apologise and say you're sorry nicely.
But Super Nanny won't let Trisha back down.
What's that sound like? Still the same. I want you to apologise to me and say you're sorry. No.
After 15 minutes, the message seems to have got through.
I want you to say that you're sorry.
A sincere apology means Matthew can come off the bench, but he can't return to the table until he's cleared up his mess.
Okay, I'd love to hear from you in chat what you noticed from that video. And I saw someone put in to learn forgiveness as something for an apology, and I thought that was really beautiful. Yes, children have trouble understanding what is asked of them when they're in an emotional state. Yeah, we're going to talk about that, right? That we want to return them to a state of calm before we're teaching them the skills. He was mad. Yes. She didn't give him time to calm down and then apologize. Yeah. Forcing them when they're not ready to. The emotions were too high. He's saying sorry to just say the words. Yeah. So we didn't see that genuineness, right? No time to collect himself first. Doesn't sound sincere. Yeah, you got it. They were engaged in a power struggle, right? Over just saying the word sorry. And what is he learning from that, right? We don't feel he was sincere even when he was calm. They were defining a genuine apology as him saying it when he was calm. But as you all felt, still didn't feel genuine, right? And did he even know what sorry means? Did he even know what he was apologizing for? And we noticed that there was no validation of his feelings, of his upset. And he's just getting more and more upset. And there's no conversation about what he might do differently, right? So when we're forcing this compliance versus helping them understand their own emotions and learning some problem solving skills around it, it impacts their ability to resolve conflict later on in life and to learn to manage their emotions later on in life. And she also uses this naughty bench, which I'm not a super big fan of, because it promotes shame versus the feeling of guilt and learning from it. And we're going to talk a little bit about shame versus guilt in just a minute. So I appreciate all your observations around how she's really forcing it and what we're noticing the impact on him of that. And it's really not getting at those goals that you were talking about early on, right? All right, I'm gonna switch screens again, and we'll watch this quick Brené Brown video that talks about the difference between shame and guilt.
So define it. Is it what we all think shame is?
You know, it's by definition, I think what emerged from the data for me is it's the deeply painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and somehow unworthy of connection, love, and belonging.
And everybody experiences this.
Everybody, it's a universal emotion.
Is it different from guilt?
Very different from guilt. So shame is really a focus on self, while guilt seems to be a focus on behavior. So shame, I am bad. Guilt, I did something bad. So just an example. I'm your teacher and I give you your test back and you get a 47 out of 100. Shame self-talk would be, God, I'm so stupid. I'm an idiot. Guilt self-talk would be, God, it was really stupid not to study for that. Man, not a good idea to go out last night. When we can focus on behavior, we are much more likely to respond with empathy and actually change. But it's like, you know, one of the questions I get from parents all the time is like, my kid lied to me. And so I looked at my kid and I said, you're a liar. And that's very shaming, right? You're a liar, not you told a lie and that's unacceptable and here are the consequences for telling a lie. When we call ourselves or other people liars or losers or, you know, stupid, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Where do you go from there? As opposed to, look, you're a great kid, but you lied and that's completely not okay. And here are the consequences for lying. And if it happens again, here are the consequences. So
back to the PowerPoint. So I just really want to highlight our goal here is to focus on guilt, right? This doesn't mean we're letting a child get away with behaviors that we know are not okay, right? What it means is we are focusing on the behavior and not on them as a person. And we can do that by empathizing with their emotional experience of the situation. So we're focusing on the behavior. Guilt is adaptive. It's helpful because it holds something that we've done up against our values and we start to feel that psychological discomfort. But she defines shame as that painful feeling that we're flawed and unworthy of love and belonging. And so we really want to focus our actions on producing guilt, not shame, right? Okay, so what skills are needed in order to effectively apologize? Apologizing is not inherently bad, but let's go back to those roots of what we know we want from apologies and those skills that are required to effectively apologize. These aren't all the skills needed, so I'm just highlighting some of the main ones. But we really want them to be able to understand, label, and manage their own feelings and needs, right? We want them to know what it feels like in their bodies, what emotions look like on different people's faces, to be able to have words for those feelings and label them, and to be able to manage their big feelings in a safe way. And in order to apologize effectively, they actually have to be able to take on somebody else's perspective, right? They have to understand that the other person has feelings and how their actions might have impacted that other person and be able to empathize with them. There's also an aspect of moral development that we know is needed, right? Children need to actually be able to understand the difference between right and wrong and how that's defined in our culture and in our communities. And they need to be able to be considerate of other people's feelings and listen to them, right? And take ownership over their mistakes and be able to not just have ownership, but take those action steps to be able to make the changes needed in order for it to not happen again. So that's a lot of skill required, right? Not sure if all of us adults have all that skill in order to effectively apologize. So we're all working toward those as well, right? So let's look at what we know about child development as it relates to these skills. In infancy, in those really early years, they start to understand their emotions and learn to regulate them. And the way they do that is by us as adults responding promptly and consistently and attuned to their needs, right? In order to effectively meet them. So we're supporting, we're co-regulating with them. We are being in a calm state so that they can return to a calm state. Infants also express let me say this, they express emotions through crying, facial expressions, and body language, right? They don't have words yet. And again, we want to respond promptly to those. And we also know that infants react to emotions and facial expressions around them. Have any of you ever had an infant start crying and then the next one starts crying and the next one starts crying, right? It's contagious. So we know they're beginning to understand emotions by what it feels like in their body when somebody else is sad. Those are the precursors to empathy. This image is actually of a brand new born baby where they did some research to show that babies can imitate facial expressions. And this is like very, very young newborn. And then here's another little clip that just highlights the contagious emotions in infancy that I think you're all familiar with.
You think brother crying? So sorry.
You know? So again, they feel it in their body, right? And that's the beginning of empathy. He's not empathizing yet. He's not understanding that this child is having a separate emotion from his, right? But that's the first step. And then as we move into toddlerhood in that 1 to 3 year old range, children start to experience a lot of emotions. As a mental health consultant, I get called, I think my kid's bipolar. No, this is toddlerhood, right? They experience a wide range of feelings as they're beginning to learn to communicate their wants and needs. And this stage is really, as you know, characterized by increased independence, right? They're wanting to explore the world around them. And when that gets interrupted in some way, their desire to be independent, we're going to see an increase in frustration, tantrums, and challenging behaviors, right? When they're not able to be independent, which happens a lot because they're only 2. So, also, they experience joy and excitement as they're discovering new things and developing new skills. And they're just starting to experience shame and guilt as young as 2 years of age. So a key point to note in this stage of child development is that they're really learning from you as their caregivers, right? And their emotions can actually be a reflection of your emotions. So this is why modeling is so important as well, which we're going to talk about. And then as they move into preschool, this is a really critical stage for emotional development where they're expanding those social emotional capacities. They're more independent and they're curious about the world around them. But there's more interest in peers, right? And in relationships. So you might start to see them develop more empathy toward others. And they should be able to start following some really basic social rules. They're starting to get that moral development and understand what's expected of them in terms of treating others, right? But they still have not learned the ability to manage their emotions, and they can experience a much wider range of complex emotions, empathy and guilt, and frustration and anger and sadness and grief, and they can have a difficulty regulating them still in the preschool years. I still have a difficult time sometimes regulating my emotions, so I don't want to, so even as adults, right? But we definitely don't want to expect it in these early years. They're still trying to figure out what to do with all those big feelings. So we'll take a look at the milestones of empathy. Newborns are really trying to figure out how to manage their own regulation, which includes their sleep and awake cycles, their body temperature, their feeding, their swallowing, coordination, and then how they communicate their needs through crying and calming back down when they're responded to. So again, when we're responding sensitively to all of those cues, we are beginning to develop their very beginning to self-regulation. If they don't get the opportunity in early infancy to have an adult supporting their early regulation, we see impacts later on in their ability to manage their emotions. So this is a really important developmental milestone. And then at 6 months, they're feeling accepted and understood by you helps them begin to offer acceptance and understanding to others as they grow. In those first 6 months, when you're establishing that secure base for them, that secure connection with them as one of their caregivers, you're letting them know that they matter, right? And when they matter, when they know they matter, this experience of being nurtured and responded to has an effect on their self-esteem, their self-image, and their self-worth. And what's so cool is we know that self-worth is the greatest predictor of how someone will treat others, right? So it's, again, not from this place of shame, but when we nurture, they're going to learn that they matter and treat others like they matter. And then around 6 months old, they start to use social referencing, right? And this is when a baby will look to another parent or a caregiver to gauge their reaction to a situation. So, for example, a 7-month-old looks carefully at their father when they greet a visitor to see, is this new person good? Are they safe? Should I feel okay here, right? That's social referencing. And they're paying attention to their parents' response to decide how they might respond. So this is why we encourage, when parents are dropping off, we encourage an upbeat and reassuring message, right? Not anxiously hovering over the child, but to say goodbye with reassurance, to send the message like, hey, you're safe here. This person is safe. This is a good place, and you're going to be okay. But when this beginning age of social referencing helps babies understand the world around them and the people around them, and is the beginning phase to them understanding others' emotions as well. All right. And then between 18 and 24 months old, toddlers start developing theory of mind. And that's when they start to realize that they have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own goals. And that others might have a different idea, different thoughts, different feelings, and different goals. Right? And they're also starting to recognize themselves in a mirror as their own person. And this signals that they are understanding that they are a separate person from someone else. feel free to put any questions in and let me know as I'm whipping through child development here. Is there anything in the chat? Just making sure. Okay. So stages of guilt is the next phase. We talked about, again, we want them to develop guilt. And in infancy, because they have no clear sense of separate identity or the effect of their behavior on others, it would be impossible for them to feel true guilt over hurting another person. And I think this is really important because I have heard caregivers say things like, he purposely hit me, or he's trying to hurt me. For really young babies, when they're trying to work out their motor skills, they might accidentally hit you. And it's not intentional. They just don't have that capacity yet in their development. As we move into the early childhood, what I think is so interesting is, as I mentioned earlier, toddlers start to understand themselves as being separate from another person, but only on a physical. So they might understand that you have a different behavior than me, but they don't understand inner states yet. So therefore, they might feel guilt over hurting another person's body, but not yet overdoing emotional damage, right? Because they don't yet understand those inner states. And as we move into middle childhood, into school years, there's an increased understanding of inner states, and they start to develop guilt over inflicting emotional pain on others, or failing to act on someone else's behalf might also induce guilt at this age. So in the areas you're serving, right, they don't yet have full capacity for those feelings. So what we do instead of forcing an apology, I'm going to show you another video. She speaks very fast in this one. I will have the language on, the subtitles on for you though. So many.
Forced apologies don't teach empathy. Most of the time, we force our kids to apologize to minimize the embarrassment that we feel about their behavior. We force them to apologize even when they don't feel sorrow or remorse. If you believe, and I think you should, that your child's behavior isn't intentionally malicious, then let me explain to you why the forced apology is not a great idea. Let's just say your kid was playing with a toy and another kid comes and takes that toy, and your child grabs it in an aggressive way or hits the kid because they took the toy. So now kids, especially young kids, are very egocentric. The only thing that matters to them is what's important to them and the here and now. So understanding someone else might have wanted to play with that toy, or that someone else was interested in something, is not anything that's on their mind. They could care less about how someone else felt in that moment. That also means they could care less about how that person felt when they hit them. They can't see outside of themselves and things that impact them at this point. So when you force them to apologize in this moment, when they're upset, when their needs are not being met, the only thing that they are learning is that I say sorry when I'm angry. I say sorry when my need is not being met. Understand that they are still learning language. So language is being learned in context. So if their understandings that apologies are happening when my needs are not being met, when I'm upset, when I'm angry, when this kid took something from me, this is when I say sorry, they're not actually learning the full and the true meaning of that word. You're not helping them to see someone else's perspective. So instead of the forced apology, you can model for them. Of course, you want to give them the tools to respond more appropriately in this kind of situation. And you also help them see the perspective of the other child, which they're not going to get right away. But you model the apology. You can say, oh, I'm sorry, so-and-so. Did that hurt you? Did it hurt you when so-and-so hit you? I'm sorry. I'm sure they didn't mean to hurt you. And then we'll have a conversation that's separate. So modeling the apology is the best way for them to understand the meaning of the apology and how to use it appropriately, not when they're feeling like caught up in their own feelings and doing it resentfully. The other way to teach children to apologize and actually mean it is to apologize to them in the moments when they feel upset or when you've done something wrong. So that means simple things. When you bump into them, you trip. I'm sorry, baby. Did that hurt? I didn't mean to hurt you. You're modeling an authentic apology. When you yell at them or you lose your cool and you see that they're scared or nervous afterward, when you calm down, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you. I didn't want to scare you. That wasn't my intention. I didn't mean to do that. I can see what I did made you feel this way. I'm sorry. So once again, you're modeling how to see someone else's perspective. You're modeling how, when I think about how what I do impacts someone else, that's when I apologize. So it may not happen right away. You have to take your ego out of it because you're embarrassed that your kid didn't say I'm sorry, but model the apology if you think that's really important. Say I'm sorry for your child so they can see it in action. Don't force them to do it when they're caught up in their own feelings and are still at a stage when they can only think about themselves.
I really liked how she highlighted the language, that children are learning language in the context of their age, and they really can't communicate the ways that we would, right? So we can't expect that. And the best way we can build this skill is through our modeling, and then teaching some of the skills that we started highlighting today, which we're going to go into now, which you already know. You all already said in the chat, so I will move through this. What we really want to do is, this visual line represents the wave of an emotion, right? And when we're supporting skill development, it is really important. Timing is everything. So before the emotion occurs is when we're thinking about prevention, right? We're putting in place, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, environmental strategies and teaching strategies, so that you can remind them when they're upset. We're not teaching it when they're starting to get upset or when they're at this very peak of emotion, right? Because as you all said in chat, they're not taking it in any way. Their language centers in their brain have gone completely offline, and they are not able to learn at that point. So our only goal when they're experiencing emotion is to support regulation, to empathize with them and offer comfort and understanding. Some kids it might be through touch, others it might not be. And then as they resolve and come down from the peak of that emotion, that's when we're supporting the resolution, which we're going to talk about some ideas and some strategies. And I'm hoping that you all will share with each other in chat some of your ideas and your strategies and the things that you do to support children at these 3 phases: prevention, regulation, and then afterwards. Okay. So she was talking about in that last video a lot about modeling, right? And I've heard this so much from teachers, that you feel like you can only display happiness, right? I have to put on my smiling face and be happy for kids all day long. And I would argue, no, that yes, we want to do it from a state that isn't scary for them. But I think it's important for them to see a range of emotions and understand that a range of emotions is a normal human experience, and for you to model ways that are appropriate to manage those emotions, right? So you might say, I'm frustrated right now. I'm going to go take some deep breaths, or I'm going to go in the cozy area and give the bear a big hug, right? Or I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, so I'm going to go take a breath in a break in the area, in the quiet area. When we model that, that's how children are most going to learn these skills. And so we're labeling other people's feelings also, right? We're saying your face is scrunched up. I wonder if you're feeling frustrated, right? We're also noting their body. Your fists are clenched, so that they can start to connect what's happening in their body, what we're seeing on faces, to emotions, right? I have, I talked about that, modeling how to manage your feelings. We're also modeling giving empathy to others who are upset or hurt. I've heard for example, some teachers say, well, good, I'm glad you got hurt. That'll teach you not to do that again. You broke the rule, right? Or get up, you're okay. Right? So these are some examples where instead we could model empathy to start to teach. That's the best way they're going to learn to empathize with other people. You were climbing on something that we don't climb on and got hurt. I'm really sorry. I can see you're sad. Would you like a hug? So you see how you said the rule in the empathy? You can still highlight the behavior, right? And be empathetic to the situation. Next time, do you want to climb over here? This will be safer, right? There's a quick little video here that I'm just going to read the words because it goes really fast. And I just want to highlight when I play it, I just want you to look at their connection, because when we apologize for, as the previous video was saying, for our own ruptures, our own moments where we maybe caused harm or hurt someone, that has more impact than anything, right? So she's saying, I can see that it was scary and that I made you feel sad. You didn't deserve to be yelled at. I was tired myself and lost my cool. I shouldn't have yelled at you. It was not your fault. How can I make you feel better? I'll try my very best not to yell again. And next time I will try taking some deep breaths myself. Just gonna look at that connection.
I follow you into the park, through the jungle, through the dark. Girl, I never loved one like you. Boats and waterfalls, alleyways and payphone calls. I follow you.
And I don't know how to get it to stop.
I follow
All right,
you
well,
into
click
the
there.
park, through the.
So we're modeling those apologies, right, to hold accountability for ourselves. And there's some research out there that shows that we're doing well as adults if 30% of the time we are emotionally attuned and labeling their feelings and present for them, and 70% of the time if we're not, right? That we're still doing really well as adults. And what I love about that is it helps me have more compassion for myself as an adult for the ruptures that I'm having all day with my child or with children, and to lean into the relationship and the care of the relationship to model those genuine apologies, right? Grace has offered some resources for you on teaching about feelings. I know you have lots of research out there and resources out there for that, but this is a really important part of having children develop empathy, right? Is to read lots of books about feelings. It doesn't have to be just books about feelings. It can be any book where you might wonder out loud about the characters in the books and looking at their faces and looking at the context of what is happening and wondering how the characters might be feeling and giving that emotional vocabulary to children. Again, we've talked about describing facial expressions as well and what's happening in their body. And I think you've all said this in chat too, right? This reflecting and noticing when they solved a problem, encouraging them to be problem solvers, not just telling them what to do. So when they come up and say, I don't know how to open this, we might go, what do you think we should do? Do you have any ideas about how we could open that? Right? We're encouraging them to problem solve and to think, and that translates to building those skills and relationships as well. I was just looking at some of the chat here. I identified with what she said in the last video because as a mother, I made several mistakes and forced my children to apologize when they're not ready. I have too. It's okay. And sometimes I do it when I'm just in my own mad state, right? And as that other video, like we're embarrassed, right? And it's our own embarrassment that is causing us to motivate that, to push that. Yeah, thank you. We'll all like confess that we've done it, right? This is normal. But we can practice doing something different. Okay. We're also some other ways we can teach is teaching them one word or a sign when they don't yet have the language so they can practice communicating their needs. You can have a communication board up where they can have different feelings or different needs that they might have, like to play or a hug, and they can bring that to you to communicate. We also want to allow them to learn through experience. A lot of times what happens is when kids start to have conflict, we pull them apart. And if they're fighting over a toy, we might remove the toy, right? And what we're doing is we're kind of robbing them of the opportunity to learn those conflict skills. How many of us as adults still struggle with conflict, right? And don't have the skills. And if we can start really early with normalizing conflict happens in relationships, and there's ways to work through it together and allow them to not jump in too soon, right? Watch a little bit and see if there's a way they can manage it and then jump in and support it if you have time. I know group care, you don't always have time. So again, 30%. In another culture in Europe, I can't remember what community it was, but I remember this video vividly where the teachers were just standing by these infants who were crawling all over each other. And one would cry and smush his face accidentally crawling over, and then he would look back and be like, "Oh, what just happened?" Someone would kind of, how babies grab each other's faces and hair. And so it was minor injuries, nothing major, but they really believed in these beginning opportunities to notice my behavior had an effect. It's the beginning of cause and effect, right? And so I'm not necessarily encouraging to do that. I know there's licensing rules and all that, but it's something to think about. Are we jumping in too soon and robbing them of these opportunities to learn through direct experience? And then we're going to teach strategies to regulate, which I know Grace also has resources for you and has lots of examples of cozy corners that you might use to help them. Everyone deserves a chance to take a break, even you as teachers, and to get away from the chaos of all the other kids, to regulate. And so here's some examples in your that you might teach young children to regulate. I've seen children as young as 2 or 3 start to practice some of these. So I'll just give a couple examples. So for example, birthday candles, you're just holding up your fingers and having them blow them out. And it encourages that deep breath. Or the balloon, where they're taking a deep breath in and filling up the balloon and then blowing it out. And again, we're teaching this when they're calm, when they're joyful, when they're connected. And then we're using these kinds of visuals to remind them to use them when they're upset. Again, they can't access language. So if we can use the visual cue to help remind them, that can be really helpful. And you'll find kids will be drawn toward one or the other. So it's part of getting to know your kid, what kind of thing they really like. Smell the flower. It's a good one too. Yes. I've done blow me over, and within seconds, kids are laughing because I say, take a deep breath, see if you can blow me over. And then I'm like, all dramatic, and they crack up. They feel powerful. They feel in control. They've re-regulated. So that one can be a lot of fun. But everyone will want to do it, so be prepared. Any other ideas, feel free to put them in chat. There's so many good ones out there. All right. How are we doing on time, Grace? We're good. All right. I'm going to share a quick video just to show you what is possible if we support these skills, because it really is possible that kids can develop some of these skills earlier on. And I just thought this video was so precious. Get it all lined up for you here. A little tricky with all the screen stuff.
When my 4-year-old is more emotionally intelligent than me.
You can do it. You can do good things. I love you, but I don't like when you take things away from me. I know you want a tone, but now it's my tone. You can have a tone and I'm done. I know it's hard to wait sometimes. But if I make you want to know the cow tone? You just can't throw that. You can never do that. So now that's okay to be mad at you. Yeah, the game. Okay, so loud noise. Want me to sit with you?
I just thought that was such a beautiful example of if we're consistent in building these skills, what can be accomplished. And you can hear the adult language in that, right? You can hear that that has been modeled to them and said to them in a consistent way, and that they're picking up on that. All right, so we're going to move into supporting regulation. And again, making sure we're pausing and connecting to our own regulation first so that we can really see them as a child, the way we would have wanted to be seen as a child, because they cannot communicate. They do not understand the way that we do as adults, right? So these are just some strategies where we're getting down on their level. We're making eye contact. If it's a kid that likes touch, we're using touch. Again, I've said all this, so I'm just re-highlighting it. The cozy corner, reminding them at those moments of those regulation strategies. And you're giving them that reflection time to be able to think about it, right? And maybe talking it through with them, which we'll talk about in a second. Bubbles are magical. Sorry, I just saw that in the chat. Those are very regulating. That's a good one. Grace has lots more examples, but here's an example of a cozy corner. You want lots of soft, cuddly things and visuals for them to practice the skills that you've been teaching them. And this is for the older toddler preschool land. All right, and then we're going to move into the supporting resolution. And I have the things wrong in there, so we'll just ignore that. Opportunities to practice resolution with support. You have access to these solution kit cards. This is for, again, I've seen older toddlers and preschoolers be able to effectively use these solution kits, where we teach them ways that they can problem solve a situation and use these visual cues to help support that. I've also seen people use a peace table, which I love. And it takes some teaching, it takes some time. I've seen tables where they have little handprints on them so kids know what to do with their hands. Because when they're feeling big feelings, what do they want to do with their hands, right? So this helps kind of give them something to do with their hands. You could also have sensory things for them to do something with their hands as well. And this is where you have visuals for how they're feeling, what they're needing, and ideas for them to solve the problem together, that solution kit. And you have it at the table and you teach them how to walk through that process. So I have seen preschoolers say, you know, or older toddlers, like, we have a problem, let's go to the peace table and work it out and practice talking it through. It's a very, very sweet strategy. This would be more for older kids or adults, or is the peace path. Having literally having feet on the floor that they can step on and face each other and have a path to walk through. Yes, calm down corner with sensory items, mirrors, and emotion pictures. Thank you, Liz. Yes. Mirrors are another really good way to teach about emotions and practice that. Those are really super fun way. This comes from Conscious Discipline. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but they have lots of good stuff. And Becky Bailey talks about the We Care Center, which helps children get a symbolic way of expressing empathy and encouragement rather than blaming or attacking. So I won't have time to show you that video, but I can send it to Grace to So you have that. It's a really cute video, but you might create a bin or a bag of ways that they can offer empathy and comfort to other people when they have it might be boo-boo lotion or a stuffed animal, or they might write a note card to someone, some way for them to gesture support and care for their peers. So this starts to build empathy. I'll just highlight the last slide again as an example. So you might say, you were really mad because you wanted to play with a toy and your friend is crying. I wonder how he's feeling right now. You cried, and then you might make a link to the past, right? And then giving them a choice to help them problem solve. You know, you might say sorry. We say sorry when we feel bad about something, or maybe you could help them rebuild the toy or go get them an ice pack, right? Like give them a choice and help them problem solve how to make amends. And if they're not ready to, that's okay. You say, that's okay that you're not ready to. I can see you're still mad. I'll do it for you, right? And you can say, Susie was really mad and frustrated and didn't mean to hurt you. How could I help you feel better? Then you're modeling it. So I just wanted to end with that. I appreciate your attention and your time today. And I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, I'll stay on and look at the chat and see if anything's coming up for you.
Thank you, Jana. A lot of very interesting, great information, and thank yous. And thank you again, Jana. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for all of your participation.